This is an update on the top bullet strike into the fuel tank. First, we'll cover another claim that the shot was impossible. We'll then go over a few points related to the claim of a ground-based shooter. Finally, as new data comes in, we'll show an updated bullet trajectory, since we wanted to keep the reconstruction as accurate as possible. It looks like some people still won't give the topmost fuel tank shot a rest. There's a new claim, which says that that shot was impossible because of the angle, but this time in the horizontal plane. The claim is based on the premise that the bullet hole is at the 9 o'clock position on the tank, that is, its westernmost point.
Where it is on this tank. It is not here, it's here. It's on this side right here. Almost a perfect perpendicular location to this tank. The fence gives you the perfect location of where these are. Here is the fence, and the two shots are here, not here. These two bullet holes were found pretty much one on top of the other, here, not here.
Actually, the claim even seems to imply that the bullet hit is to the north of the 9 o'clock point.
In order for it to hit even, a few degrees off of 90 straight onto it, you would have to have these holes here, but they are not. They are on this face. Here is the fence, there is the face.
Based on this premise, the claim says that if the bullet had come from Mandalay Bay, the bullet hole would be more elliptical, not round, and the residue would be more directional.
That is round. This is not the tank. This is a different hole. But look at the shape of the hole. If it goes in at an angle, it's going to show you that angle. It is traveling at an angle of attack, not a 90-degree shot.
The premise of this claim is false. The bullet hit is quite a bit to the south of the 9 o'clock point. We'll start with the least accurate method of showing this, then move up all the way to the most accurate one. Here's the photo the claim is based on. First, you should not make any judgment based on how you think the fence is oriented, because the lens makes the fence curve. Here's the direction of the fence at the left edge of the screen. Now at the right edge. They don't match, because you're looking at a curve, not a straight line. But the picture does give us a hint where the 9 o'clock point is on the tank. The fence runs north-south. Each fence post has a V-shaped top. The V-shape is in a plane perpendicular to the fence, that is, the V is aligned east-west. This means that anytime we see the V-shape edgewise, that is, the two V-bars overlap perfectly, we're aligned east-west. In the photo referenced by the claim, we can see these two V-shaped tops from two different sides. This means that the east-west plane is in between. This V-shaped top looks like it's seen edge-on, but in a close-up, we can see that the two bars don't quite overlap. This tells us that the east-west plane, and thus the 9 o'clock point on the tank, is someplace here, and thus the bullet hit on the tank is clearly to the south. A user called Rick Healy pointed to this FBI cleanup video, in the context of the top fuel tank shot. This video was shot from the southern wing of Mandalay Bay. Note how the bullet marks are centered horizontally on the tank surface. This tells us that the hotel was likely the point of origin. Moreover, this video allows us to estimate the horizontal angle at which the bullets struck. Here's how. Near the tank, there are lines that run east to west, such as this container, and north-south, such as the fence. They let us establish an orthogonal coordinate system within the photo's perspective. It can be used to draw this quadrant on top of the tank. Bisecting the quadrant tells us where 45 degrees south of the 9 o'clock point would be. Bisecting it again shows us where 22.5 degrees would be. This tells us that the bullet struck at a horizontal angle of about 20 degrees south of the 9 o'clock point. The most accurate measurement can be taken from Jason Goodman's video, in which he's marching north, alongside the tank fence. In this clip, we can find the frame in which the top bullet hit is exactly halfway between the edges of the tank. What's special about this frame, is that we, the observer, the bullet hit, and the axis of the tank, are all in a single plane. This lets us mark the spot on the fence that's also on this plane. Using the divisions of the fence as a yardstick, we can find this spot on the fence in a top view, and thus locate the bullet hit exactly. It is 21 degrees south of the 9 o'clock point. Here's a more detailed description. The shortest path from Suite 32-134 meets the tank at 17 degrees south of the 9 o'clock point. If a bullet came down that path, it would hit the tank at 90 degrees with respect to the local tank surface. The actual topmost strike hit the tank at 21 degrees south of the 9 o'clock point. The bullet hit at an 86-degree angle with respect to the local tank surface. The bullet hit 2 feet 10 inches to the right of the point on the tank closest to Suite 32-134. The video in question tells us how to interpret bullet strike clues, but then fails to see the clues when they contradict the ground shooter claim. First, the video compares the amount of residue, to the left and to the right of the bullet hole, and concludes that the bullet struck roughly at a right angle in the horizontal plane. Yet, strangely, the video then instantly downplays the big difference between the residue above and below the bullet strike.
Look at the residue. It's almost even all the way around. This one tells you a little bit more travel to the bottom, so it's a little bit higher from the location.
No, the residue is not a little bigger below, it's much bigger. This suggests a strike from above. Other mentioned clues are the bulge and the depression on opposite sides of the bullet hole, reflecting how the bullet pierced the metal.
You see how it pushes up because the bullet travels under? This is round because the bullet came in from this location, and as it went through, it pushed it up. This was down, this is up.
The same pattern is present in the fuel tank strike, with the bottom edge of the bullet hole sticking out, which suggests a strike from above. Again, this is ignored. The claim of a ground-based shooter has other problems. The only rationale for Paddock to have an accomplice on the ground shooting at the tanks, would be if the accomplice could do a better job than Paddock, that is if the accomplice was closer to the tanks and more accurate. So why would an accomplice, who's closer and more accurate, aim for the topmost spot on the tank, if the bullet would promptly come out through the roof, spending almost no time within the tank? By the way, the notion that the strike under the lip was deliberate, is refuted by the fact that one of the two strikes didn't penetrate the tank. Most likely it was the top one, because the rim iron around to top edge makes that spot much thicker. Why would anyone deliberately aim at a thick area of the tank, if a thinner area is only a few inches down? Here's how the bullets hitting the fuel tanks may have looked like.
308, armor-piercing API.
There were people running towards the airport around the time the fuel tanks were struck. Given the visibility of API hits, especially at night, seems like we should have plenty of eyewitness accounts of the fuel tank strikes. Strangely, it doesn't seem like we have any. In one of the comments sections, a poster has identified the API rounds in crime scene photos as Winchester .308 Silvertip. By the way, please identify yourself for credit. This allows us to use a more accurate drop chart for the fuel tank shots. We also have more accurate terrain data. This map from the U.S. Geological Survey shows the ground elevation under the building itself, which is higher than the adjacent street. A photo of the fuel tank under construction in 2011 shows that it sits in a containment ditch. A current telephoto of the fuel tanks lets us estimate the depth of the ditch. These new data raise the height difference between Suite 32-134 and the tanks, and thus increase the vertical angle a bit. Here's a diagram with all dimensions. Here's the most up-to-date recreation of the bullet passing by the lip of the fuel tank. The base angle was 8.5 degrees without the bullet drop, and 9 degrees with the .308 Winchester Silvertip drop. At its closest, the bullet missed the lip by 0.6 inches. This is the moment the bullet was passing under the lip, in 3D.
Mandalay Bay says they've decided to renumber their floors. According to MGM Resorts, floors 31 through 34 will change. They will now be floors 56 to 59. The change comes after a gunman opened fire on the 32nd floor of the hotel. 58 people were killed and hundreds more were injured.
In this video, we'll go over the recent claim regarding the supposedly unexpected steep wound angles among the Vegas shooting victims. We'll first show simulation results, then we'll discuss how steep wounds relate to the alleged attack from helicopters. Then we'll go over some general points regarding locations in the festival area, as well as statistical sampling. Recently, a series of videos made a claim that steep wound angles, present among some of the Vegas shooting victims, are supposedly evidence of an attack from helicopters, given that the angle between Paddock Suite and the festival was roughly 17 degrees. First, a comment. The video in question incorrectly uses percent signs when discussing degrees. This is a degree, this is a percent. A road gradient can be expressed by a percentage, but degrees and percent are not the same thing, and should be kept apart. To analyze the wound angles, we'll use the already introduced 3D simulation. Since we're dealing with randomness, each simulation will consist of multiple runs. Normally, we'd avoid showing human figures and wounds, but there's no other way to analyze this problem. To demonstrate the wound angles, the results will be shown on a single human stand-in figure. Here's how it works. All wounds in the simulation, regardless how and where the body was positioned, will be accumulated, transformed in space, and shown on a single upright figure. Here's how one simulation run looks like. Again, the red lines are fatal, the yellow lines are non-fatal wounds. The first test is of all people standing, with no ricochets. Here's the resulting distribution of wound angles. Positive values mean the entry wound is above the exit wound, and vice versa. Red boxes are fatal, yellow lines are non-fatal wounds. As expected, the angles cluster just under 20 degrees. The video in question shows 17 degrees as the angle between Paddock Suite and the festival area, but this is the angle to the center point. The shooter targeted the area closer to him, which is why the average angle is a bit higher, just over 18 degrees. Now a test of all people standing, with ricochets turned on. The ricochets add a smaller cluster of angles near zero, because ricochets travel not far off the ground. The average wound angle for a ricochet is slightly under zero, because the initial phase, when the bullet is rising, has more energy, and thus is more damaging. The ricochets cause proportionally more non-fatal wounds compared to direct impacts. Now a test with ricochets on, and half of the people crouching. This adds a widespread random group of angles on the right. With half of the upper bodies now being more parallel to the ground, direct impacts and ricochets can enter from much steeper angles. Even a perfect 90-degree angle is possible, though not very likely. The tests show that steep wound angles are easily explained by ricochets and people not standing upright. According to the claim, the fact that some wounds show angles steeper than the angle from Paddock Suite imply an attack from helicopters. Let's explain why it isn't the case, point by point. First, if people were shot from helicopters at a steep angle, then why aren't most, if not all, of the wounds at steep angles? Why do we have only a few steep wounds among the 58 victims? If bullets came from helicopters at a steep angle, then all bullet impacts on the pavement and objects would reflect this angle. Since no investigator mentioned this anomaly, this would mean that all investigators on the scene must be in on this conspiracy. How is this conspiracy maintained without leaks? The claim also shows very steep bullet paths, close to 80 or 90 degrees. Did they also come from helicopters? If so, then the helicopters would have to have hovered directly above the festival grounds. We know from videos shot outside the venue, that this wasn't the case.
Oh my God!
Let's think this through. If there are very steep wounds, but there were no helicopters directly above, then people must have been leaning to receive such wounds, even from helicopters. But if we admit that people were leaning, then why do we need helicopters to explain any steep wounds, instead of just people leaning? In terms of steep wounds, what do helicopters explain that leaning doesn't, besides being an unnecessary complication? Now let's go over two general points that the author of these claims misunderstands. When discussing wounds, the author refers to locations where people were, quote, killed. They're not the same thing. These are all different locations, where wounds were received, where a person passed away, where a body was located by police, and where a person was pronounced dead. We're discussing wounds, so we are only concerned with the first case, not case 3, or sometimes 4, which is shown on police maps. Just because 20 deceased people were left on the ground near the stage, doesn't mean that other people received wounds elsewhere. The LVMPD report makes clear that it only shows locations where bodies were found by cops, and that the bodies had been placed there by others. We know for sure that wounded people, possibly fatally, were carried out of the area in front of the stage. The only person known to be fatally wounded outside of the venue was Melissa Ramirez, known from the CCTV video. Another general point, going back to the men-to-women ratio. The author doesn't seem to understand when statistical sampling is valid. The author thinks that because the gender ratio of the 20 deceased people left on the ground matches the gender ratio of the audience, it means that those 20 people are statistically representative. This is false. A sample of 20 is too small to make any judgment about several thousand people near the stage, regardless of what the sample shows. Let's illustrate this. First, a statistical calculator shows that a sample of 20 from 6,000 has an error of about 22% either way, that is, the gender ratio could be anything between 33 and 77%. This is too wide to make any judgment. Let's illustrate this with video clips. This is a recently posted clip showing the audience near the stage. We can use frames from this clip to create a single composite image, with as many visible faces as possible. Counting people, we get 18 women and 11 men, for a women-to-men ratio of 62%. Let's compare ratios. Raymond Page video shows 56% women. Among the deceased left on the ground near the stage, women are 55%. In the old Barstool clip we've just shown, women are 62%. So which of the two random samples is more representative of the audience targeted by the shooter, the deceased, or the audience near the stage? Answer: we don't know. The fact that the ratio among the deceased is closer to the gender ratio in the audience doesn't mean anything, because women may have been 62% of people near the stage, in which case the stage sample would be more accurate. Simply put, neither sample is big enough to make a judgment. Here's another way to demonstrate insufficient sample size. In the last episode, we've shown a very short, random excerpt from the Raymond Page video, just for reference. Let's simply count the first 20 to 30 people we see in that excerpt, using 2 frames, and taking care not to count the same person twice. We get 18 women and only 8 men, that is, women are 69% of this small sample. So does this sample of 26 people accurately represent the total of 382 people in the Raymond Page video, where we see a 56% women ratio? No, because the sample size is a bit too small. Let's now apply the exact same logic to the sample of 20 deceased people left on the ground. If 26 people are not enough to accurately represent about 400 people in the Page video, then 20 people certainly aren't enough to represent 6,000 people in the area targeted by the shooter. The fact that the women ratio among the 20 deceased happens to be close to the ratio of the audience, is the result of pure chance, not valid sampling, and is thus meaningless. Here's the takeaway lesson. You don't accept sampling results because you see numbers you like or expect. You accept sampling results when your sample is big enough.
Runway 26 right. Taxi vehicle and contact your ramp. Skip ground completely.
Legion 497 across 26. Golf, go to ramp, and you have a good day.
See ya. Maverick 32 Las Vegas Tower, proceed as requested. Report over the garage. Any idea what's going on over there across the street? Just off your left there, across the street, so by the left door. We just see a lot of police cars, and more just headed that way.
Hey, Tower, I think that concert, that's why the police are there, getting out.
Did a concert for the police?
No, I think that it was, I'm not sure what kind of concert it was, but I think it's just getting out. They're blocking off the road to get people out of there.
Okay, makes sense. Attention all helicopters. I have information on a active shooter at the Mandalay Bay. Use caution if you want to reroute and head back inbound and maybe approach from the south. Let me know what you want to do. Did you get the message about the situation? Okay, I highly suggest maybe routing further west and then coming in from the south. I'm not going to depart. I think what I want to do is just get you guys back on the ground.
Okay. Yeah, we can let you know.
3497, we're not going to be departing for a few minutes. I'll have information for you here in a few. Alright, Maverick 32 and basically all the Mavericks. What I want you to do is do not proceed any further south. I want you to go west for 3 miles and then south until you're south of the field and approach from the south.
Okay, Tower, Maverick 32 heading out to the west.
And Maverick 3, follow your company.
Maverick 3 following company.
Maverick 27, follow the company.
Roger, close over.
Hey, give me another mile from there just to be safe. There might be more to this. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maverick 21, just follow your company ahead. We're rerouting you around a situation there over the strip. Robbie 98, remain outside the Bravo. We have a situation over the strip. Don't have all the details yet, but remain outside the Bravo airspace. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want you around that situation and come in from the south, plug into the Bravo airspace. The helicopters ahead are maneuvering around the situation there.
I don't know if you got it, but they're saying shooters possibly on the upper levels on the east side for an aircraft they're flying over there.
Southwest 3497, as soon as these helicopters are down, we're going to start rolling. Should be about 4 to 5 minutes.
Vegas Tower, Care Flight 1 is 10 miles to the south with Delta inbound for Spring Valley Hospital, please.
Clear to Enterprise Bravo airspace. There's a situation over the strip. I need you to remain at least 3 miles away from that at all times.
Vegas Tower, Mobile 7.
Mobile 7 Tower, go ahead.
I need to side or right. Immediately on the axis, I have individuals. Reactive shooting, make away, back, closing.
Did he say he has somebody on the runway?
Taxi speed, we got a situation on the airport. 19 right's closed, I'm not landing 19 left. I'm trying to keep all the airplanes away from that area completely.
Tower Metro 5, we got the 2 in our light on the runway right here, so we can get one of the ground units over here.
In this video, we'll discuss wound statistics, based on a list of the wounded compiled by a user called Return to Logic. We'll first go over statistical data, then we'll show a few interesting cases. The information on the wounded people contains 215 names. It was compiled from reports in the media, and sites like GoFundMe. Here's a comparison with the gender ratio of the audience and the deceased. Women were 55% of the wounded. Very close to the audience ratio. Women were 53% of those wounded by gunfire. At 87%, women were very overrepresented among those wounded not by gunfire, but in the commotion, or while escaping. Overall, 7% of the injuries in the database were injuries other than gunfire. But this number may be inaccurate. Since the data comes from media reports and donation sites, gunfire wounds, which are more dramatic and thus more likely to be reported, may be overrepresented in the data. The actual percent of non-gunshot wounds may have been a bit higher, say 10 to 15%. Here's the distribution of wounds by body parts. Note how the distribution roughly corresponds to how big the parts are as a percentage of a human body. In a past episode, we showed a casualty matrix which estimated wound fatality rates for body parts. With the new data, we can better estimate these rates. Note that the original matrix indicated rates only for direct strikes from the shooter, while the numbers from the new wound database also include multiple hits by one bullet and ricochets. The actual fatality rate for direct hits is probably some number in between. This change does not affect any previous simulations in terms of the gender ratio or angles, only the overall number of casualties. 15 wounded people recall which gunfire burst, in numerical order, caused their wound. We can use this to graph how casualties changed over time, with a visible decrease after the third volley. However, this chart may be inaccurate, because people tend to lose count, that is, among those who remember which volley caused their wound, smaller numbers may be overrepresented. We now know of a second case of someone being hit by gunfire outside the venue, in addition to Melissa Ramirez, known from the CCTV video. The second case is Jenna DeCandio.
We ran till we couldn't run anymore, and we met a fence. And I think it was, from what I can now talk to people, the edge of the airport.
It seemed like we were a good way away from the venue, and then that's where
I came.
Jenna had fallen down.
And he's like, "Run! You have to run." And she's like, "Dad, I can't."
And she's like, "Dad, I think I've been shot."
That was when she got shot.
That was when she got shot.
That's when she got shot. We were out of the venue, across the road, we were at the airport, the fence to the airport, and she got shot then.
Given these two cases, we are dealing with three possibilities. 1. Paddock was targeting a few individuals in the airport area through a scope. 2. Some shots aimed at the tanks missed and hit people by accident. This seems unlikely, as the spot where Ramirez was shot is far away from the tanks. 3. One automatic round briefly strayed out of the venue. One woman, who says she was working on the stage, said that her friend had been protected by a key in his pocket.
I was actually on the stage.
So your friend that got hurt, was he with you when it happened?
No, he actually stayed on the other side of the stage to finish the 2 boxes left. I think he have a shot in his hand and one on his leg, and they actually said that the third one he had like a steel key in the back, so that protected him from the bullet.
There were 2 pairs of identical twins among the wounded. One pair is the Baca sisters, both of whom were wounded.
Shooting victim Gianna Baca is visiting a special patient, her identical twin sister. The 17-year-old twins were both shot during the Las Vegas massacre.
The other twin pair are the Clarkson brothers, both cops with the LVMPD. One of them, Casey, on the right, was shot in the neck. By the way, we can check how the number of 2 twin pairs among several hundred wounded relates to twin rates in general population. Twin rates vary across space and time, but this mostly applies to fraternal births. For identical twins, the rate is more constant, about 1 in 300 pregnancies. 2 pairs among several hundred wounded is exactly what we should expect. A man called Bill Robinson was shot through his stomach and buttocks. The bullet lodged in his wallet. His photo of the bullet is the only publicly known image of a bullet from the Las Vegas shooting. The husband of Shannon Rinke, one of the wounded, claims to have seen muzzle flashes coming from Mandalay Bay. Some of the injured people were transported on wheelbarrows, used by food vendors. One of those who helped with the transport, Todd Riley, was then himself wounded multiple times.
Todd and others grabbed the woman and put her in a wheelbarrow used to carry ice and raced to a triage area. Seconds later,
I realized I couldn't stand.
Todd says he had 8 or 9 wounds from bullet fragments from his legs to his stomach.
In cases like the Harvest Festival shooting, people generally view gunshot wounds as more dramatic and dangerous. However, in some cases injuries from trampling or escaping may be more damaging than some gunshot wounds. For example, Bruce Ure, An off-duty Texas cop was hit by a ricochet in his finger. This was potentially very dangerous, because the bullet may have damaged his fingers, but the actual injury was a small cut.
When I was laying on the ground, the one hit the ground, it shattered about 8 inches away from me. I got just a little cut.
On the other hand, Diane Litzenberg, who was not shot, but got knocked out and trampled, had a spinal cord injury and was paralyzed on the left side, for which she's still in physical therapy. One more example of a dramatic non-gunshot injury is Gabriela Lomallo, who when jumping over a wall, fell on a tree branch which pierced and lodged in her abdomen, one of the very few cases when an object other than a bullet penetrated a body. On sites like GoFundMe, you generally expect bigger donations for people who post their photos, and whose injuries are more intense. But some cases seem strangely disproportionate. For example, Tawny Womack was shot in the chest above the heart and posted a photo, yet she only got $900. Ryan Sarzing, who did not disclose his injury, nor did he post a photo, got $90,000, almost 100 times more. Perhaps the reason is that Ryan is one of the very few Canadian victims. This probably means that Canadian donations were concentrated on only a few people, especially if a big Canadian media outlet featured his fundraising site. We've shown some pretty bad non-gunshot wounds, but the most dramatic injuries were indeed gunshot-related. Rob McIntosh was shot 3 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, all with a single bullet.
It went in me here, it came back out, it went in, and it came out, and it lodged in my arm.
Rachel Shepard was shot 3 times in the chest, with different bullets.
I have lost all of the mobility, and especially my left side.
Amazingly, one person, the girlfriend of EMT Kelly Culbertson, survived being shot in the heart.
Tonight she's doing really well. She did have her second surgery for her to repair her humerus, and she's just resting right now.
During the shooting, many men covered women to protect them from bullets. One sad case is that of Bobby and Jenny Parks. Jenny was shot and fell to the ground. Her husband covered her with his body to protect her. Unfortunately, she was shot again despite the protection, the bullet also passing through her husband's arm. Soon thereafter, Jenny passed away. This is a very quick response video. Recently, a user called Drew Anonymous made some interesting observations about the layout of the 32nd floor. At the end, he asked a question about the photos of investigators taken soon after October 1st. The question is as follows. If these photos were taken on the 32nd floor, why is the door at the end of the hallway not breached? The simple answer is that these photos were not taken on the 32nd floor. Drew Anonymous correctly points out unique details in the photos, like these vents and panels, which identify this as the 100 wing. But there's a difference. Here's the current view of the 100 wing on the 32nd floor. Pay attention to the pattern on the carpet, right next to the first corner on the right, which leads to the vending machine. There's a shape on the carpet, which we'll refer to as a red crown, whose 3 prongs point to the left. Note how this line, which connects both corners on either side of the hallway, intersects the crown just in front of its longest middle prong. In a top view, it looks something like this. Compare this to the photo with the investigators. Now the line connecting the corners intersects the crown much closer to the smaller, closest prong. In other words, the carpet pattern is shifted about a foot or 2 away from us. This is even more noticeable in the photo taken from a lower angle. In a top view, the situation is now more like this. In other words, the photos with the investigators were not taken on the 32nd floor. Most likely, the investigators were on a different floor to limit scene contamination. While CSI teams were retrieving bullets from the 32nd floor hallway, all traffic not related to bullet removal was probably routed through an adjacent floor, most likely floor 31 or 33. The best way to test this theory is to take photos of the carpet pattern near the first corner on adjacent floors. This is a very quick response video. Recently, a user called Mr. Burgundy showed new photos of Jason Aldean's buses, and the bullet damage done to them. Mr. Burgundy correctly identified where the buses were parked in the venue. He then noticed that one of them, the red one, apparently vanished during the shooting. These are the two buses as shown in the LVMPD report. The white one and the red one we're interested in. The red bus seems to vanish during the shooting, as seen in the videos filmed from the rooftop. So where's the missing bus? Most likely, hidden in the shadow. We need to severely enhance the image, just to make out the silhouette. Now let's take a daytime photo of the red bus and its surroundings. We can transform this photo, and use it as an overlay, to verify that the size and position of the shape we see in the enhanced image fits the red bus. We won't get a perfect match, as the perspective of the photos are different. But we can try to match at least the most basic corners. The shape in the enhanced image fits the red bus very well. So what's responsible for the bus vanishing in the shadow? The lighting in the scene, and the narrow dynamic range of cell phone cameras. Most of the light in this area comes from this bright light. It's relatively close to the ground, so it casts long shadows. The red bus is in the shadow of the white bus to its left, because the white bus has vertical fins on the roof which jut upward. The second issue is the dynamic range of digital cameras. Because they respond to light unevenly, they very often destroy detail in very dark areas, that is, shades of dark cannot be distinguished. An example. Even if we keep the black hair and the white dress constant in value, what you can see in the shadows depends on the range of the camera. In the worst-case scenario, any dark shade below a certain value turns black. This is most likely what's happening in the shadows around the red bus. This is a very quick sequel to the video on the vanishing bus. Previously, we've discussed a bus that seems to have vanished during the shooting, but actually was found in the shadows. Today we're going to show a vehicle that actually vanished, or tried to, during the shooting. This photo was taken on October 1st, before the shooting. Note the three big rigs parallel parked behind the stage. During the shooting, the middle one is gone, only to reappear very soon after the shooting. To verify that it's really not there during the shooting, we can enhance the shadows, as we did with the bus. We see that there indeed is a black space between the two outer rigs. Since all three have white roofs, and are the same height, it can't be a problem with shadows, or the camera's dynamic range. We can also see that there is no diagonal line separating the roof from the back, where the middle truck should be, as is the case with the other two rigs. So what happened to the middle truck? It seems it tried to leave the venue. Note that these two trucks have lights on, as if ready to move, or already moving. So what's going on? There are two possibilities. Either these two trucks were in the process of transporting goods, that is leaving, or about to leave when the shooting started, or, the trucks tried to leave the venue after the shooting started, presumably to escape. There are clues that the middle rig was not transporting goods and leaving when the shooting started. First, the middle of a concert, and its headlining act, seems like a strange time to transport items out of the venue. Second, if the truck had been on its way out for transport, why did it back into its loading space after the shooting, instead of continuing on its journey? If it was cops who ordered it to stay in the venue, there would be no need for it to back into its space. Also, with the truck back in its space, its cargo hold is open and seems empty, which probably wouldn't be the case if the truck was on its way out prior to the shooting. So was this rig trying to break out of the venue? Possibly. If so, who else besides the driver was aboard? In the wounded database, there is no mention of any wounded person being on a big rig, only on pickup trucks. If this was a breakout attempt, it's not clear if it was a good idea. Such a big object moving could draw the shooter's attention. It may have been better to hide behind the parked rig, and wait the shooting out. In this video, we'll cover another claim made by HDRCFX Cornwall. First, we'll present another correct prediction. Then we'll cover the claim alleging that the LVMPD report photos were taken 10 floors above. Finally, we'll credit the early timeline shown in the last episode. First, another correct prediction. In the last episode, we suggested that the airport video had a recording gap due to a hardware glitch. Let's now examine the first misaligned volley in the airport video. It is actually out of sync, due to a hardware glitch on the cell phone. The cell phone probably froze due to being hit, as this moment is very chaotic in the video.
Okay, let's go.
This is now confirmed, as posted by the user Lucum76, the author of that video. Since the first video about Cornwall's claims was greeted with a warm reception by his fans, as well as a well-researched and thoughtful answer by the man himself, here's a sequel. In one of his videos, Cornwall made the claim that the crime scene photos in the LVMPD report were not taken on the 32nd floor, but 10 floors up, in the Four Seasons.
Those crime scene photos were not taken from the 32nd floor. The sound was 10 floors above.
This claim is easily refuted, without any 3D recreation. That's because on YouTube, we can see actual views from Mandalay Bay. Here's a video filmed by a tourist who stayed in 32135. Here's a video filmed by a tourist who stayed 10 floors above, in the Four Seasons. Her suite was in a different wing, close to the center. Since we'll focus only on vertical differences between distant objects, not horizontal ones, not being directly above Paddock's room makes little difference. For more clarity, we'll also use views from Google Earth, which are sharper. In Google Earth, we'll use accurate coordinates and altitude, to avoid relying on textures. We'll cross-check Google Earth views with actual views to verify their validity. Let's start with a simple comparison. This is how the view changes, if we travel vertically between 32135, and the Four Seasons 10 floors above. This switch in perspective changes how objects overlap in the picture. Since we're concerned with a change in altitude, we'll deal with vertical differences only. An example, the tip of the Luxor obelisk overlaps this building when viewed from 32135, but it's below the same building when viewed from the Four Seasons. Before we start our analysis, let's show the key buildings. This is the Westgate, formerly Hilton. Note the protruding features on its rooftop. This is the Signature. These are three separate buildings, but from Mandalay Bay, they look like one. This is the Drew, which will be partially visible to the left of the Westgate. Let's see how the view from 32135 compares to what we see in the LVMPD report, by pointing out specific details. The roof of the Westgate protrudes above the distant mountains. The roof of the Drew is below the roof of the Westgate, forming an L shape. The roofs of the Signature overlap the tops of the mountains. They're slightly below on the left and about level with the mountains on the right. On the left behind the Signature, there's a building reaching about 1/3 the height of the Signature. All these details match what we see in the LVMPD report. Let's now compare the view from the Four Seasons to the photos in the report. Note that the daytime view was taken from further to the east. This introduces horizontal shifts, but we only care about vertical differences. The roof of the Westgate is now below the distant mountains, in contrast to the report. The roof of the Drew is now flush with the Westgate, no longer forming an L shape, like in the report. In the daytime view, the Drew is mostly hidden, due to the horizontal shift, but you can still see it reaching the full height of the Westgate behind its diagonal edge. The roofs of the Signature are now quite a bit below the tops of the mountains, unlike in the report. The two comparisons tell us that the photos in the LVMPD report were taken from the 32nd floor, not from the Four Seasons. Cornwall's claim basically debunks itself.
In this second render, even the buildings in the background made sense. The top of the Drew was now flush with the distant mountains, And we could see the L-shaped silhouette that the Drew formed with the Hilton Grand Vacations building.
Correct, because that's exactly what you see from 32-135. Cornwall tried so hard to get his 3D view to match the report photos, that he didn't realize he was recreating the correct view from 32-135, and not the one you'd see from the Four Seasons. The reason for his faulty conclusion is likely some error in the 3D reconstruction he did based on nothing but a perspective photo. For proper reconstruction from a perspective photo, you need at least some of the following information. If you're missing all of it, like Cornwall, you have no objective way of verifying your reconstruction. There are many examples of how perspective can fool the viewer, such as the Ames room.
The room looked completely normal. This is something we've grown up with all our lives, and this assumption is so strong that it completely overrides the fact that the people are actually changing sizes. Even though in the real world, obviously people don't change sizes like balloons.
The author of the early timeline, shown in the previous episode, has been identified as Missy America on Twitter. Here's the latest version of the timeline, looking even better. Regular viewers will have to forgive the tone of this episode. Usually, the videos here are calm and collected. But this is done very quickly. Today is a bad day, and the sheer stupidity we're dealing with is profound. A viewer requested a review of the latest E Hoover video. It looks like Hoover's claims are getting progressively dumber. Hoover claims the first shots did not come from 32-135. His proof boils down to the following. It takes 1.2 seconds for sound to travel between Paddock's suite and the tall ace cell phone. The interval between the supersonic crack and the muzzle report is half a second. Sound travels 170 meters in half a second. Therefore, the shooter was 170 meters away from the cell phone. This is false. This half a second here is not the time the sound travels between the shooter and the cell phone. It is the difference, again, the difference, between the total sound travel time, in this case 1.2 seconds, and the travel time of the bullet. The bullet travel time is not taken into account anywhere in this so-called proof. A bullet is not made of light. It does not reach the target in an instant. It takes time for it to get there. When the crack is heard, it's not the moment the bullet is leaving the barrel. It's some time later. Let's use Hoover's own graphics to illustrate this. This is the time it takes sound to travel from the shooter location to the cell phone. Hoover thinks that the crack thump interval is equal to this time, like this. It's not. The crack thump interval is only one part of it, like this. The other part in the beginning is the time the bullet takes to travel to the target, which is when the crack will reach the listener. This is the bullet travel time, with the audible crack at the end. This is the time it takes the sound to travel from the shooter to the target, at which point the muzzle report is heard. In our case, it's 1.2 seconds. And this is the crack thump interval. In our case, half a second. Ci does not equal M, as Hoover thinks. Ci equals M minus B. The bullet travel time depends on the bullet speed, but the math is much more complex, because the bullet slows down with time. That's why crack thump intervals are listed for specific cartridges and conditions, in pre-computed tables. This is just a random example of such a table, not reflecting the specific conditions or cartridges in Las Vegas. However, if we look up 1.2 seconds for the muzzle report, and half a second crack thump interval, we get a distance of about 450 meters to the shooter. No surprise there. In cases like the Harvest Festival, it gets even more complex, because we need to take into account the direction and distance from the changing bullet path, which affects the crack arrival time. This was explained months ago, in a video posted on November 9, 2017. It looks like some people can't be bothered to research the subject they're presenting. Hoover sums up his video as, "That's physics. No, that's not physics. That's stupidity, clickbait, incompetence, sensationalism, need for attention, and the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's all of these, but certainly not physics." Hoover also says that 170 meters equals half a second, and asks if there are any questions. Yes, we have a question. How does a guy, who doesn't know that bullets don't travel in an instant, have 8,000 subscribers? This would be an excellent question to answer. A viewer pointed to another Hoover video. We'll address it. But from now on please stop pointing to his videos, because there's no point in dealing with the endless sludge of stupidity. The error in his new video is immediately obvious, even without examining his spreadsheet in detail. This is one of Hoover's tables, showing the time required for a bullet to travel a certain distance. We're showing only distances in equal 50-meter intervals, to better show what's going on. It's instantly obvious that he's using a constant speed, in this case 882 meters per second, to get the bullet flight time for a certain distance. This is laughably false. Bullets are not like a car on cruise control, with its own engine, traveling at a constant speed. They're like a toy car. Once released, they instantly start losing speed. This is a chart of bullet velocity versus time. What Hoover thinks is happening is that a bullet travels at a constant speed. No. It starts to lose speed as soon as it leaves the barrel. This requires more complex math. That's why the best option is to use actual ballistic charts, not your own clueless formulas. If what Hoover thinks were true, a bullet would take an equal amount of time to cover the same distance as it flies. One look at an actual ballistic chart tells us that a bullet needs more and more time to cover the same distance as it flies. Again, the correct shooter distance can simply be looked up in a crack thump chart, but apparently Hoover prefers to keep clear of the obvious correct answer, and instead come up with one faulty math formula after another, to get more subscribers. This is beginning to sound like a repeat of the Millerite movement. When their prediction of the second coming did not materialize, they just kept coming up with more revised predictions. In this video, we'll use 3D audio analysis to estimate where the first single shots landed on the festival grounds. First we'll discuss ammunition and the visual presentation, then we'll show the animation. Finally, we'll cover some loose bits and pieces. All results are tentative, as there is no public info on the ammunition used, nor which weapon fired the first shots. We'll use several recordings, listed in the description, and we'll use visible cues to synchronize video. However, cell phone recordings have inherent audio sync issues, which can't be avoided. These issues were explained in a past episode. The round used in the analysis is the closest match found for the timing data. This does not mean that this round was used. It simply means that lacking additional info, it fits the data the best. The animation will show a top view, with all sound elements sized properly, and shown in 3D for each round. The orange cone is the supersonic shockwave. Its angle and curvature is defined by the velocity at a given moment. When this shockwave hits the ground, it's shown here as disappearing. In reality, depending on the surface, it may produce weak bounce echoes. The research literature gives the radius of the cone as 100 to 160 feet. But it seems that in Las Vegas it may have reached 200 feet. The blue rectangle is the rifle report. These dots show when the respective sound occurs in each recording location. Note that cell phones are too inaccurate to show a precise, directional pattern of objects passing by at bullet speed. Here's the 3D animation synchronized to the first shot's video, played back in real time. Now 4 times slower. Now a recording by Josh Tonelli.
Yes, you heard I was put onto the metal on wheels.
Now 4 times slower. Now an alternative view from Mr. Burgundy's library. Now 4 times slower. Here are the likely target locations. These locations are more ambiguous along the bullet path, where the ellipses are longer. They're less ambiguous crosswise, where the ellipses are narrow. We can evaluate the results by comparing them to the known account of someone being hit by the initial shots.
Everything started from me when I heard one single loud bang right behind me, and I was in the VIP suites. And I turn around and look, and I see that someone has fallen. But I know that I saw a woman fall with the correlation of that first shot.
Being shot up here on the balcony, we can see people crouching down rather, to attend to a woman.
The witness mentions the first shot, but it seems that her location is a better match with the 5th shot. Perhaps this was the first shot that she noticed. Supposedly, Jake Morphonius has a video of another person hit by the initial shots, but only audio is played.
During these initial shots, there was a man who was shot and killed only feet away from witness 10. Let me just play a few seconds of the audio for you.
That person's dead.
If someone was indeed fatally wounded by one of the initial shots, and if that person was not subsequently moved, we could compare this analysis with the locations of the deceased shown in the LVMPD report. Unfortunately, it's hard to properly match the perspective of that report photo, but it looks like there may be a potential correspondence. If someone is in touch with Jake Morphonius, and he could share the video privately, it could be used to evaluate or correct this analysis. An analysis like this one is impossible for other groups of single shots, because we don't have enough recordings with a sonic crack for those shots. Also, unlike videos filmed near the stage during the music performance, recordings made during the other single shots don't offer common visual cues, which are needed for better synchronization. A common question is, why do shots sound louder further away from the hotel, like in the first shots clip? The answer is simple. Cell phones constantly adjust the recording level, depending on how loud the environment is. This is seen in the airport video, where the cell phone reacts to gunfire by lowering the recording level, and then adjusting it back up. In videos filmed near the stage, the loud music has a comparable volume to the gunfire. Cell phones adjust for the combined sound volume, and thus gunfire ends up quieter than it would be by itself. Further away from the stage, the gunfire has no competition from other loud sounds, so it stands out in the recording. 5x5 News pointed out that one of the recorded sonic cracks is doubled. Its two peaks are separated by a mere 12,000ths of a second. It seems that this occurs when the bullet forms a secondary shockwave in its wake. The two shockwaves spread out at a slight angle to one another. In theory, it may be possible to detect this separation at the edge of the supersonic cone, at its furthest distance from the bullet path.